right, I shouldn't have pointed it out. Well, I had to have a go at shaving the other one in order to try and bring them together. Right, so it seems a bit odd using a microphone when we're a smaller group. I've tried to write this presentation in a fairly accessible way, so if there are things that you want to know about research methodology and things like that, by all means at the end, if you want to grab me, or when we're having a break or something, I can talk about those sort of things. Okay, and you have to keep reminding me to use this microphone because I'm going to forget that I'm meant to be doing it. Okay, yeah, so I should introduce myself. My name's Peter Woodward. I'm Senior Lecturer in Learning Disabilities at the University of Greenwich. I mostly train learning disability nurses, but also paramedics and other fields of nursing and that sort of thing as well at the university. Okay, what I'm going to talk to you about today is I'm going to just do a short background on the mental health, how it presents to people with learning disabilities, a bit of background there. So I apologise if some of you are already experts in the area. I'll look at some of the risk factors, protective factors for developing mental health problems in people with learning disabilities. Then just one slide on what mental health promotion is. If you want me to go into that in any greater depth, please ask. Ask any questions as you go through. If you do, though, I'm going to have to put you on the mic to do that so you actually get picked up on the stream. And then I'm going to talk about the content of the mental health promotion groups that I ran. So I ran a number of groups over a 3 or 4 year period, and these were evaluated. They were evaluated as part of a PhD, and I'll give you the results for those. And some of the results are what people with learning disabilities thought about attending these groups, but also staff that have also run very similar groups as well. Okay, and we'll see how we get on, because I've got some additional content I can show you from the groups if people want, if we get the time at the end. Okay, so people with learning disabilities are more likely to have mental health problems. The figures vary very widely. At any point in time, about 16% of the population will have a mental health problem. Okay, and people with learning disabilities, the lowest figures that can be found are about 23-24% for people with learning disabilities at a point in time. But the figures vary widely depending on which people have been looked at, and also all the studies on people with learning disabilities are always very, very small scale. So we're talking in the hundreds rather than the thousands and tens of thousands that we'd really need to do a proper evaluation. They may be less likely to have some mental health problems and more likely to have other ones. And we also find that they're very difficult to spot mental health problems in people with learning disabilities for a variety of reasons, and we'll talk through those as well. Okay, so they're about 3 times more likely to have schizophrenia and psychosis. There's different reasons why that might happen. Higher levels of ADHD, so that's attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and they're more likely to have them into older age as well. They're more likely to have depression, more likely to have dementia, far more likely, particularly Alzheimer's disease, but all types of dementia. Higher levels of obsessive compulsive disorder, or you might argue with this one that people with learning disabilities don't always have obsessive compulsive disorder. They might actually just have obsessions, and they're not subjectively fighting against those obsessions, which is something that we might have if we were looking for a pure diagnosis of OCD. So sometimes, say, people with autism might have very obsessional behaviours, but they actually enjoy those obsessions. They're not fighting against them. We find lower levels of eating disorders in people with learning disabilities, but we might find different eating disorders. So we see lower levels of anorexia nervosa and lower levels of bulimia nervosa, but then we'll find higher levels of things like pica or pica, where people eat inedible objects. Okay, so we might see different profiles of mental health problems as well. And we see lower levels of substance misuse and substance abuse as well. So that doesn't mean it's something we shouldn't worry about, because some of the research says that when people with learning disabilities do have substance misuse problems, they tend to have very, very chaotic lives as a part of that. Okay, so when they do have substance misuse problems, it can be a lot more devastating. They might be more difficult to hold down a job, whereas people without learning disabilities may still be able to hold down jobs when they've got substance misuse problems. Any questions about any of these at all? You sure? I ran this same group this morning. It took about 15 minutes to get past the first 2 slides because we were debating things. So, okay. So this is an example. So this is an example of the sort of groups that I ran with people with learning disabilities, where we got them to think about why people develop mental health problems. So here, Joan has moderate learning disabilities. She's become more depressed over the last few months because she works in supported living in a residential service, and due to staff changes and because of shift work, people haven't identified that she's been deteriorating. Okay, so this is one of the things that always used to happen when I worked as a nurse. We often got people in to be assessed, and you would talk to the members of staff and say, how were they presenting 2 weeks ago, or how were they presenting 2 months ago? And often the members of staff would say, I don't know, I've only been working with this person, since today, or I'm an agency member of staff. So the higher staff turnover we have in services, the more likely sometimes things are likely to get missed, particularly when there's a condition that might have an insidious onset, so might take months and months for the person to get worse. Joan is assisted by staff to get up, to dress, wash her hair, and carry out household tasks. If she was left alone, if the staff weren't assisting her, it was likely that she would have stayed in bed longer, her sleep pattern would have changed, she wouldn't have been taking care of her appearance, and these sort of things would have got spotted by staff, but they get missed because people are doing that for her, or prompting her, or assisting her. Because of her depression, she's often tired, withdrawn, lethargic. When she's asked to do things, she may lash out at members of staff. The members of staff talk about this being a challenging behaviour, and so that gets missed as well. Now, the majority of challenging behaviours do happen due to something in the environment, but something like a mental health problem may be a setting event for that, or make it more likely to happen. Okay, so what we look at here is something called diagnostic overshadowing. Have you all heard the term diagnostic overshadowing? Okay, so that's where we might attribute any behaviours or what's going on for that person due to their learning disability rather than an underlying health problem or mental health problem. I'll give you an example of this. When I was a support worker 25 years ago, so it was a long time ago, hopefully things are better now, we took somebody who went from being fully continent to wetting the bed 8 times a night. And we took them to the GP, and the GP said, why have you brought this person here? They have a learning disability, they wet the bed, that's what they do. Okay, so that's an example of attributing a behaviour to the person's learning disability rather than something else. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you an exercise, and this is something that we do with the people with learning disabilities that I work with. If I can divide you into, it'd probably be easier with 2 groups. Would you mind coming forward? You might have to stop the filming here, or you're going to be filming the backs of people's heads. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some cards here, and some of these have got statements written on them. And what I need you to do is sort through them, and if you look on the screen, it says to put them into a pile of things that you think might protect you from having a mental health problem, put them into a pile of things that you think would make you more likely to have a mental health problem, or if you're not sure or you're arguing too much, just leave it in the middle and we'll pick that up in just a minute. Okay, so just going to give you a few minutes to sort through these, and then I'll take your feedback and we'll talk about how we work with this. Thanks. Okay. What we'll do is we'll go through some of these. A lot of this is based on mainstream research, and obviously it's not the same for every person. It's just going on generally what happens. So where do people put having lots of money as a positive? Do you put it as a... Not sure. Okay. So having lots of money is actually a protective factor for mental health problems. It might be that there's a correlation here that if you don't have a mental health problem, you're more likely to earn money. But generally, if you have money, you're less likely to suffer from stress. You can afford things, etc. One of the debates they had this morning was whether there's a threshold of having an adequate amount of money is good for your mental health, and then if you've got too much money, maybe it can send you the other way. But generally, we find that money is a protective thing for mental health problems. Being separated from the people you know. Where do people put that? As negative? Yeah, I mean, generally we're going to think of that as being negative. Yeah, you're right. Having stimulating things to do. Yeah, it's a protective factor. Okay. Having suffered abuse. Negative. I mean, obviously that doesn't mean if somebody has suffered abuse they will automatically have a mental health problem, but you can have things like PTSD and things like that go along with it. Having a girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, partner. Protective. Not so sure. Oh, did you not have that one? Okay, sorry, these probably got jumbled up in my bag. Yeah. Did you have it as protective? Yeah, so generally having a life partner is a protective thing. Obviously, if you're in an unhappy relationship that you can't get out of, it would have the opposite effect. And also, I think there's another one in there about having lots of friends. Generally, the bigger your network is, the more protective that is. Being physically disabled. Yeah, okay, and I think there's being deaf or being blind in there as well. Okay, it's different sometimes when people are born with things like hearing problems or sight problems. It doesn't have the same effect as being as not having those and then developing those later in life. But generally, disability, illness, pain, discomfort are all things that we associate with mental health problems. Sorry, I've done that one as well. And that one. People denying you opportunities because they think that you'll fail. Yeah, it could be protective, I suppose. No, actually, I'm not sure that would be protective. Yeah, that's another thing. I'll stop there. I won't go through all of them. The reason I've done this is because the things that you will find that are protective for you, okay, or the ones that we've identified as being protective are less likely to happen to people with learning disabilities, and the things that we think that might make you develop a mental health problem are more likely to happen to people with learning disabilities. So this is an exercise we do with people with learning disabilities when we run the group to try and identify things that are protective and things that are detrimental to your mental health. So this is a list here. It's been rather artificially broken down into biological, psychological, and sociological issues. There was a typo there this morning, and I'm not sure I've corrected it properly. Anyway, what we find is people with learning disabilities have all these things that will make them more likely to develop mental health problems. So things like brain damage. They're more likely to have things like sensory impairments, physical illness and disability. There may be some genetic issues so if we look at Alzheimer's disease is associated with Down syndrome, where things have a joint etiology. Drug and alcohol abuse, as I said, is less likely, but it can be very chaotic when that's combined with in the lives of people with learning disabilities. They're more likely to be on medication, more likely to be on multiple medications. Their development might be skewed, less so now, but when we used to take people and put them in institutions, often they'd be separated from family, from friends. They're more likely to suffer from deprivation and abuse. There's often separation and loss events, and sometimes these have a greater impact than we would expect them to. So somebody who's living in supported living who has a favourite member of staff. That member of staff may leave after 2 years and go on to get another job. That might have a devastating impact on some of the people that live there that we wouldn't expect, or the member of staff wouldn't have expected to have such an impact on them. Other life events that we wouldn't have thought would have been so serious can often cause a lot of issues for them. Positive and negative learning experiences. So a positive learning experience is attempting something and doing very well at it. An example might be if you sat your driving test and you failed and you feel, I don't want to do that again, I don't want to put myself through it. That would be a negative learning experience, and sometimes people with learning disabilities have whole lifetimes of that. Self-insight and self-esteem, so they might think about why their lives are different to other people on not doing the same sort of things. Attitudes and expectations of others, discrimination, tend to have less likely to have money, financial support, likely to be put in inappropriate environments. I don't know if any of you ever worked in any challenging behaviour services, but often when you leave shift at the end of the 7.5 hours, you know, your ears are ringing and your head's buzzing, but there's people living in those environments all the time. Or some of the services for people with more profound disabilities where there's not a great deal going on for them as well. Family issues, so often families are under a greater level of stress or greater financial hardship if they have somebody with a learning disability in their family. Right, so an example here, so this is something we would look through with people with learning disabilities when we're running groups to see if they can identify why they think somebody might have developed a mental health problem. So in this example here, Simon is a man with mild learning disabilities. He's 25 and he lives with his parents and his sister. He has trouble with his speech, so it's difficult for him to make friends. He has a heart problem which often leaves him short of breath. He also has epilepsy and he's on medication for this, but he still has seizures about twice a year, which causes him a great deal of anxiety, and he worries about it as well. When he left school, he worked as a cleaner, but he found that the work was tiring. His boss said he should find other work, and he's been unemployed since. His sister, who's 21, has a well-paid job, a new car, and is moving in with her boyfriend. Simon feels that despite being younger, that she's more successful than him. He thinks about whether he'll have a job and the aspirational things that people think that they might have. He thinks about whether... Oh, sorry, I'll just repeat myself. Simon's parents are very protective of Simon because he was bullied when he was younger, and they prefer him not to go out unless he's with them. And this means that he then spends a lot of time playing video games indoors as well. Since he's been doing this, he's put on weight, which is another thing that he ruminates about. Now, because of this, he's become more withdrawn and depressed. And what we would do is we would get people with learning disabilities in the groups to try and identify some of the things that might have meant Simon went on to develop a mental health problem here. Okay. Now, some of these things you can't fix, such as some of the biological issues. But one of the things we can work on is things like relationships, getting into the community, activities, diet, exercise, sleep. These are the sort of things that you can work on, and that's one of the things that we did when we set up our mental health promotion groups. These are a list of protective factors. Okay, none of these will be particularly big surprises. Some of these are from the research. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. And some of these are when we asked people with learning disabilities what they felt was good for their mental health as well. So obviously things like being active, having a good diet, having work, or at least something stimulating to do during the day, having a relationship, having friends and peers, being part of the community. Okay, so these are the things that people with learning disabilities find that are protective. Yeah, please. No, so yeah, so with Simon, he's somebody that we, sorry to repeat that, so I was asked if Simon had attended the group. That was somebody that we designed as a case study to get group members to look at to see if they could identify the sort of things that might have made Simon more depressed. And they tend to be very astute at finding that out. Right, so Uh, yeah, now the question is that sometimes we might talk about upsetting things as part of the group. Now, one of the typical things that often comes up is discussions around bereavement and this sort of thing. What we tend to do is we will try and discuss that for a while, and then what I'll do is I give time at the end to discuss those sorts of things. And it can be quite common that this happens, so people will identify within their own life things that we might be talking about, but exploring those issues as part of the group. And one of the things that we always do as the group is we try and get them to give each other peer support as well, which I'll talk about how we do that in just a second. But feel free to come back and ask that again. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sometimes the group explores these issues anyway. Where are we? Okay, so just to discuss what mental health promotion is, to put it very simply, it's rather than waiting to someone to become mentally ill, to have a problem, we try and stop that happening in the first place. So we try and prevent mental health problems from occurring by trying to build up people's resilience, trying to work on protective factors and avoid risk factors. What we find in mental health for people with learning disabilities, it tends to be highly reactive. So people get ill and then they receive treatment, which is what I did with the groups, where I got people in and we tried to work with them one-to-one or as a group to improve their mental health. Okay, the format we did is we used this training pack, okay, which I helped design about 8-9 years ago. But what I wanted to do was run lots and lots of groups using it and evaluate it to check that it does actually promote people's mental health. So what we generally do is we get about 5 to 10 people that attend, and they might have 1 to 2 members of staff, depending how much assistance they need. And each group lasts about 2 hours, and it has a break in the middle. And we run this over a 12-week session. So usually they run from, say, September through to Christmas or Christmas through to Easter, to try not to have any breaks in between. Hang on just one second. Okay, so when we run a group of the 2 hours, the first thing we do is we spend 20 minutes finding out how everybody has been over the last week. And what people will either do, they'll identify something that's good that's happened to them in that week, or something that they've found a challenge or that they've had difficulty with. And then as a group, we try and problem solve that. So the first example here, sorry, for some reason this is off the screen now. That should say, I've joined Run England, which is a group, exercise group, and we went jogging last Wednesday. So that would be something positive that somebody has identified there. The kids are so noisy on the bus at 4 p.m, that scares me. This is an example. This is somebody actually said in the group, somebody from my old school is always begging on the high street and I don't know what to say to him. So they didn't have the assertiveness skills, didn't realise that they could say, no, I don't need to give you money in this situation. And so as a group, they would problem solve that and come up with ideas of what they've done. Obviously, as a facilitator, you need to make sure that the advice is sound, because if somebody said, you should go up and punch that Robert, that may not be the best sort of advice that you could give. So another example, what do you do if your neighbour plays music so loudly? And often what we find is people that attend the group have similar problems to other people, so they have somebody that they identify with as a group, but also that they can work together to solve those problems. Then we start the actual content of the group, which is in this pack if you want to take a look later. So we might give an example on, healthy diet, exercise, sleep hygiene, advice on alcohol, because you sometimes get people who will say things like, drinking beer is fine, it's spirits that are bad for you, and things like this. So we need to give some sort of education as well. We talk about what different professionals do. We look at the symptoms of mental health problems so people can identify those in themselves. And we often do these through games. There'll be role plays. We've got videos and clips that we use as well, and if I get time at the end, I'll show some examples of those. Then at the end of the group, we have relaxation exercises, and we tend to use progressive muscle relaxation, which the evidence base says, is often best to use for people with learning disabilities. Does everybody know what progressive muscle relaxation is? Where you tense muscles and then relax and you work through your body. And then we finish off with people talking about anything that they've got coming up in the week that they are worried or concerned about, and we get them to try and problem solve those as well. So people that are scared of going to the dentist, or that might have a job interview, and we talk about coping skills that you can have with that. So things like relaxation exercises and what other people have done as advice. Here's some pictures of me running a group. This is used with permission. So this was a group I ran in a MenCap a few years ago, and so we're working through some stuff there. And luckily you can't see my bad spelling mistakes on the flip chart there. Okay, now I evaluated the mental health promotion group, and I asked some questions before people attended to see what they thought of it. So we were looking to see if there were any changes in the people's mental well-being, if they became less depressed from attending the group, if they became less anxious from attending the group, and I also wanted to test what their knowledge of mental health was. So if they knew about mental health problems, and they knew about treatments, and they knew how to stay well. Okay, and we use a number of tools from these. The first one here is an outcome measure called the Core LD, and then that's the Glasgow Anxiety Scale and the Glasgow Depression Scale we used as well. Okay, so I'll give you the results of these. 50 people took part, but only 32 people attended enough sessions for me to actually ask the questions of them. So what I said was you had to attend at least 10 of the 12 groups for me to assess you before and after to see if it had an effect. So some people were ill, some people got a job and left the group, and so there were various reasons why they didn't attend all of the session. Then I also did a follow-up at 6 months to ask them how they were 6 months later, but only 26 people I could track down that had attended the group. But these were the results that I found. So with regard to mental well-being, the maximum score on this is 28, and the lowest is 0. The lower the score, the better the person feels. So the average score when people attended the group was 8.6. And then at the end of the group, the average score was 4.5, which was quite an improvement. So this was a significant improvement in their mental well-being. Okay. After 6 months, when I went to interview them again, they had gone up to 7.8, which meant after 6 months, anything that they'd gained from the group, they'd began to return to their baseline again. And here's a graph of it. So that's then before the group, after the 12 weeks of attending, and then 6 months later, began to return to how they'd been in the first place. Right, okay. If the question I've been asked is, what do I put that down to? I'll explain why in a couple of, because when we did some of the qualitative evaluation, there was a debate about whether it's anything to do with me or whether it was just getting everybody in a group together, like tea and biscuits therapy. Yeah, yes, sorry. Right, okay. Yeah. Now, it would have been far better to use a control, but due to the limitations here, we couldn't. A control would have been great, apart from the ethics of not giving somebody treatment that you'd like to. But often a number of mental health promotion things, they can't use a control group for that. Also, because there were about 10 groups that took place, they took place over a number of times. So for one person, there may have been a change in their life, so something got worse or better at home. But for the whole 32, due to the statistical analysis, we should have been able to, because we used a one-tailed pair t-test to check that it was significantly significant. But I can talk to you about that later if you want the analysis of it. Right, so the majority were done in the community, so people were asked to come into, on a few of the groups into hospital settings. Another one, we got people to come into their local MenCap, so we run about 3 or 4 groups where we got people to come to their local MenCap to attend. I did run one group in a forensic inpatient setting, but it wasn't so successful, which I can talk about why that happened as well. Okay, the next thing we looked at was depression. So the depression score, the maximum score is 40 with the lowest 0. The lower the score, the less depressed the person feels. So the average score was 9.9, which is almost the threshold score for depression. So on average, people felt quite depressed. At the end of the group, that dropped as an average to 7.3, which was once again, that was significant. It was found that that the reasons why were due to the group rather than just by pure luck. And then after 6 months, I went to interview people again, and nearly all of them had returned to their threshold levels of depression, which suggests that the group is one of the reasons for this. Next was anxiety. The maximum score, sorry, that's a typo. The maximum score is 54, not 51, I apologise. The lower the score the person feels, the better. So the average score was 17.6. At the end, it was 17.1, so it was a slight reduction, but not to a significant level. So my group didn't do anything for people's anxiety. The average score after 6 months was 19.9, which meant when we returned to people 6 months later, they were more anxious than they were in the first place. And there's a graph just to show you. So there's a slight drop from attending the group. The final one was looking at knowledge. So the knowledge questionnaire, there isn't a highest mark, but we found that the highest mark anyone got before attending the group was 13. So these were asking questions about mental health and treatment and that kind of thing. And the higher the score, the more the person knows about mental health. And the average score at the start of the group was 6.1. And at the end of the group, it was 12.5, which is a very large improvement in their knowledge. Unfortunately, after 6 months, a lot of people had lost the knowledge that they'd gained from attending the group. So, at the end of the group, they could talk about treatments for mental health problems and where they could go for treatment. And then 6 months later, they'd lost all of that knowledge. And there's a graph to demonstrate it. So they were beginning to return down to baseline there. Okay, so what does the questionnaire tell us? That people feel better for attending the group. They feel less depressed. They're only slightly less anxious. They learn a lot more about mental health. Unfortunately, they've lost a great deal of the knowledge that they've gained or the gains that they had from coming to the group. So one of the questions I was asked earlier is, it might be that just getting people into a social setting, if we'd have just run a group where we got together for 2 hours and we had tea and biscuits and we had a bit of a chat, maybe that would have improved people's mental well-being as much as running the actual group improved their mental well-being. It's very unlikely we'd have got any changes in their knowledge. Okay, so their knowledge would not have gone up on mental health by just drinking tea and biscuits and having a chat. Okay. No, right. So it's an excellent question. Just to repeat it, did people continue with the relationships they had that they built during the group? Right. This is one of the things that came out of the evaluation when talking to members of staff. Is a number of them made friends, and then they continued. So the first group I ran, there were a couple of men that joined the group, and they started going to the cinema together and playing tennis together, and so that was seen as a progressive step for them. There were other people that attended the group that then went on to attend other groups that they'd never interacted with before. So some went on to join a health group or a social group. That was particularly within MenCap, that ran a lot of other groups that they couldn't get some people to engage with, but they were happy to attend that once they'd attended the group that I'd ran with them. As a case study, because one of the things as well about returning to baseline is there's an argument that we should perhaps run the group indefinitely. So if people benefit from it and their knowledge goes up and they feel less depressed or better mentally from attending the group, we should carry it running forever. Okay, and when we ran a group originally, the first group that I ran, one of the advocacy workers there, one of the arguments they had was that professionals come and they run a group for 10 weeks, 6 groups or weeks or whatever it is, and then they disappear again and leave everyone. And so originally, it wasn't started by me. I worked with them for about 5 years. There was a group that was run in Lewisham in southeast London, and that ran for more than 10 years. And the members of that group published. So they published nationally and internationally. They spoke at conferences. They designed training materials. They were involved in designing this pack as well. So on a case study basis, and one of the members went on to be the mayor of the People's Parliament, so they were the learning disability mayor of the borough. So there were positive outcomes that went way beyond the remit of what the group was to do. So it improves people's social lives and their ability to interact in other groups and their ability to go on to doing other things. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, so the question is, was there liaison between other professionals and families and carers? The only liaison with families and carers was by accident, by knowing them. Okay, so by doing like voluntary work for MenCap and that kind of thing. With professionals, I encourage professionals to actually try and run groups themselves. So I assisted 3 groups that were run by nurses to run their own groups, and I went along and ran them and I would have been present for maybe 8, 9 out of those 12 sessions. So, which is something I still do. So if anybody is interested in running a group that's local to me, I do try and help them set them up. So there was a lot of liaison through services, but most of those were in one geographical area. Sorry. So where was I? Okay, what did members of the group say to us? They said that they enjoyed coming to the group. They would come again if they could. They wanted the group to continue. So just like the first group that we ever ran, everybody was very upset that the group finished and they wanted it to run indefinitely. And one of the arguments we thought was, as there are 12 sessions in the group, you could run one a month and just keep running it as a constant cycle each year, but it would just be on a monthly basis. The bit they most enjoyed was doing relaxation exercises. However, you found that they wouldn't do these outside of the group. So they'd all say that they loved doing relaxation exercises, but then when you'd be talking to them, to the members of the group, and they said, I've got a job interview coming up, and I'm worried about it, and you said, well, you could use your relaxation exercises, and they say that's a great idea, and you'd see them next week, and they wouldn't have done them. Okay, so one of the things that professionals suggested was that if you do things like download apps onto people's phones, they're far more likely to use technology. So one of the community teams that I liaised with, they suggested an app called Smiling Mind. I don't know if anybody's heard of it. It's sort of a mindfulness-based meditative thing, and they got everybody to download that onto their phones so that they could practice relaxation at home. So one of the things that they suggested was use of technology, both to educate people, but also to get them to practice things when they left the group. They enjoyed meeting new people and making friends. They would have liked more videos as part of the training. So there are 3 video clips that are part of the training pack. One of the ways that was done to work around this, and this is something I discovered when running the groups, is I would do something that say, oh, I'm going to talk about bipolar disorder. Has anybody heard of bipolar disorder, bipolar affective disorder? And all the people attending the group would say, that's just like Stacey from EastEnders. Okay, now, I don't know if it's Stacey, I might have got the name wrong. I don't watch EastEnders. Okay, I got it right, okay. I don't watch EastEnders, but this was a local community team. What they did was they started looking for YouTube clips of Stacey from EastEnders, and then using that as a way of educating the people that attended the group. And it turned out nearly 90%, I would say, of people that attended the groups all watched EastEnders, or would watch not just that as a soap, but all of the soaps that were available, and Holby City, and Mrs. Brown's Boys apparently was very popular. I'm not sure why. And not that I think I could have used many clips from that, but so that was something that we did to take forward to educate people. I will show you the video clip at the end maybe, but I'm not sure about being filmed and showing things from the BBC, whether I'm infringing some sort of copyright. I can run and turn the camera off. Right, so these are some of the feedback that people said. So some of the things they said, but the staff were nice, they loved the group. When is the next one? They made friends, things around relaxation. So these are all comments of people that attended the group. So even if it hadn't been very effective for treating mental health problems, there were no worries. So I know we had a questionnaire, we were talking about, it did it bring up issues that people were upset about or didn't want to talk about? One of the things we found from evaluation is nobody identified that as something that they were upset or worried, or that they found coming to the group distressing. They were all quite happy with that. No. So the question I've been asked is, did anybody leave because they found it distressing? It was nearly always things like problems in the service that they worked in, so they didn't have enough staff to bring them, getting jobs, becoming ill. So some people became physically ill. So there were things that happened that prevented them from attending the group. Yeah, so and some people just very erratic attendance. So for some people that attended the group, 10 in the morning was too early. Okay, so they'd turn up one week and then they'd sleep in, or they'd come an hour late the next week. Right, what did staff think of the group? So there were a number of professionals that I also asked them. I interviewed about 10, mostly nurses that had run mental health promotion groups. They all thought the group was good. There was some debate about whether it was the social side that was the good thing, so whether we had got together, as I said earlier, and just had a general chat, whether that would have been as effective. Yeah. Yeah. Well, another thing as well. Yeah. I think both examples are right. And another thing as well is often people would turn up and they had issues with the staff that worked with them, and they couldn't bring that up with staff teams, or they didn't feel assertive enough. But when other people in the group were saying, what you're telling me is wrong, you know, that's things like, so there'd be somebody in a residential service, and a member of staff would come in, they'd be watching television, and the member of staff would switch channel to their favourite programme when somebody was watching it. And they would tell the other members of the group, and the group would all say, that's wrong. They needed the confirmation of other people to say, no, that shouldn't happen, you should be talking to the manager about that, and that sort of thing. So I think it's multi-faceted, some of the good work it does. It's very difficult to tease some of this out. So I'm a bit conscious of time, 1 second. I'm getting close to the end. A common theme was people going on to do other activities from joining the group. So as I said that earlier. The group works better with people who have mild learning disabilities. The more complex some of the problems people had, the more staff you need. So as I said, I tried to run this in a forensic service. You needed a lot more staff there to help support people that might have more complex needs or that are very ill. Yeah, so I just said that. People that attend the group would practice in the group but not at home. Sorry, I said that earlier, didn't I? Okay, and that technology could help enhance the group. They found that using YouTube clips, using phone apps and that kind of thing helped. Sorry, have you got a question? No, no. Yeah, I think the content would have to be very, very different for somebody with a more severe learning disability. So I've run a group before in a day centre for people with moderate learning disabilities, but it had to be run very loosely, and often people that were attending the group would sit there and then they'd hear the tea trolley go past outside, and then 4 people would jump up and run out the door. But you just had to let that go and encourage people to come back in and work with them that way. Yeah, it's one of the things we found is it's a lot easier. It's the same with a lot of psychological therapies, you know, things like CBT. It gets to a point where it's very difficult to do CBT with people, you know, that have a more severe learning disability, or you have to adapt it in a way that makes it quite different from what you originally had. Well, the group that I ran in the forensic service, I had to abandon it after 3 sessions, okay, because there wasn't enough support there. I'll tell you what, I'll chat with you about it afterwards, about the logistics of it. But what? What, so that staff teams can do this? Yeah. So the point of this pack, which I don't want to wave about too much because it looks like I'm trying to sell it, okay, and which, you know, this is designed for people to run their own mental health promotion teams. So that was the idea. However, I then wanted to evaluate it to show that it works. So this will be published, you know, in the next year or so, and then that will mean that people can then try and run their own groups or adapt it. I mean, this is now about 9 years old, 8 years old, so I probably need to rewrite it, or me and the other authors do need to. But I think I'm going to have to stop because whoever's on next is going to want to set up here, so I apologise, we're going to have to stop here, but I'm going to be here if you want to talk to me during break or later on about anything. I'm more than happy to discuss things in more detail, or if you want to give me an email address and I can get in touch in future as well. Okay? All right, thanks very much.
did it with Sally, so it's a bit different, wasn't it? Jim's a bit different to Sally.
Yeah, Sally's probably a lot better.
Yes, because he's taught us Sam, he has to.
The Revs, that's REVS, got nothing to do with those that wear white collars, of which a member of that used to be my dad, but he is not alive anymore, so he's no longer a member of that group. But excellent. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what sort of music you sing? And if you fancy, you know, you can sing us a song right now.
Yeah, basically, I listen to the Revs, and not only that, I've sing pop and rock songs. We make our songs ourselves, and there's one on YouTube and two on YouTube. One's Empty House and one's Don't Cut Us Out. And the reason one is I've done Don't Cut Us Out because it goes to people out there that have lost their support and that. And that's basically showing the government, telling people, don't cut us out because we need the money and need the support.
Excellent. Are you going to sing for us now? Are you going to sing? You can sing right now. No? I could do a bit of...
Go on.
No, you carry on.
No, that's right. Where did I go? What do I do? Where did they go? What did they do? Boom, boom. Where did they go? What did they do? Where would you go? What would you do? Boom, boom, boom. Don't cut us out. Don't cut us out. Don't cut us out. Don't cut us out. Don't cut us out!
Wow. That's brilliant. I want to, A, I want to get one of your T-shirts because I'll wear it, and B, I want to come to one of your gigs so I can stage dive. You wouldn't allow me in it, would you? Oh, God, it's him again. It was bad enough having to share a day with him, but, God, he's on bloody stage again.
It's because I've got passion for people learning disabilities, and I love you all.
Excellent. So Don't Cut Us Out. It's on YouTube. It's by The Revs. And where are you playing next?
We're playing next in Brighton in the Blue Camel Club. That's going to happen hopefully in September time.
Okay.
And if you go onto YouTube, put The Revs Arch Ivory Studio, so that'd be IVY Studios, and you'll find one saying Don't Cut Us Out and The Empty House. Enjoy.
Okay. Could someone do me a favour, because we're up here and we're not down there, could someone tweet out The Revs and get a link to it? Send it to me, because I have a feeling you're going to appear on stage in London at some point. Because yesterday, and our good friend Michael over there will vouch for this, Sally Phillips is going to, part of the charity we're setting up, she's going to do some comedy events that she's going to charge people tickets to come to see, clearly. And we want people with learning disabilities as well as the famous people, who are actually the people with LD, the other people are just the add-ons, come along to events. And I'm going to formally ask you, would you and your band play at that event that Sally Phillips runs as a comedy show? Because we can easily have you on stage as well.
Yeah, if you want me to perform anywhere, I would love to do it. So just call me, I'll be there.
That's it. So please tweet that out. And Sally's just agreed to having that happen. It's lovely to see you say it on behalf of someone else. It's great. No, I'm serious. That we'll make that happen because we want to do about 3 or 4 events in the coming year within the next few months about that. And I think that's absolutely fabulous. So we've come towards the end of the day. And here comes Jenny. Jenny makes fabulous biscuits. I've had a lovely time meeting Jenny and having a biscuit. So on behalf, because she makes such lovely biscuits, do you want to say some words to anybody?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to say?
Why?
Why? Because you're brilliant. What about Project 2? Because some people might not have heard about it.
What am I going to say?
Well, whatever you like to say. What do you want to say? What's it been like today? Has it been okay or?
Interesting.
Why has it been interesting?
Making what cakes?
Mm-hmm.
I've enjoyed it.
You've enjoyed it?
Yeah.
And is there a message you think you'd like to tell everyone?
And I say thank you to Martin Chisel.
He's over there. He's trying to hide. He's trying to hide. So And I met Jenny this morning. I've never meeting her in my life before, but she's fabulous. She's got purple glasses, and they're my favourite colour. So that was a positive experience for me. Does anybody else on the floor want to say anything? Do you want to do a little dance, Jenny? Do a Bollywood. Go on.
I'm a bit tired now.
You're a bit tired now. Yeah. If Martin does it with you, will you do it? Should we get Martin up?
Yeah, but Martin will do it though.
Okay, Martin will do it. Okay. So this is Martin and so hang on. Did you see that? Did you see? You're fabulous. So Jenny, are you coming up to do a little bit of this? Because I've got no idea what you're going to do. So we're changing light bulbs. I thought that was like 20 social workers and nothing ever happened. Oh dear.
So,
cheap joke.
What we learned at our It Takes Two event, Jenny, was when we did Bollywood, how to change the light bulbs. And that was basically it.
So why don't we all change some light bulbs? So it takes a room full of people with no light bulbs to try and change a light bulb. Jeepers creepers. Should we all get up and do it? Why don't we all get up and do it, and then Jenny won't feel like she's been put on so much. So we'll go and change some light bulbs. Andy, that includes you, mate. Come on. He thought he was standing there and he was going to get away from it. Okay, so who wants to come up the front, or should we all come up the front and join in together? Because that would be lovely. Anybody else want? Come on, Bob. You look brilliant at this. Yeah, George, Rona, everybody, come up the front and let's have a changing light bulbs moment. And could someone then tweet it out as changing light bulbs? And this is how many people it takes to change a light bulb. We need some music, so Andrew can start singing again. Okay, so here goes. In about 2 minutes, we're going to change light bulbs. I think this might be euphemism for changing lives. Changing light bulbs, change lives. Yeah. Okay. Everyone up? Come on, Tom, don't be shy. Come on, the build lot. You know, I'll have to report back to Ben that you were very, very deviant. You wouldn't join in. Yeah. Actually, that's not a bad idea. We could have our own little fest, couldn't we? Michael. Oh, yeah, you tweeting it? Who's tweeting it? You're tweeting it. Right, okay. So my Twitter handle is @JimGBlair. If you tweet it. Yeah, I thought I had. So how do we do this? I've got no idea. I'm over to Martin and actually over to Jenny to show us how to do it.
Left or right? Right?
Right side first. Wow, this is the changing light bulbs, changing lives. Healthier futures. What a bunch of brilliant people. There you go.
Well, that's like not having this way,
yeah, you see. Wow. Oh, you didn't know that was going to happen. Neither did I. Okay, so I don't think we've kept to the agenda at all, have we? No. That's fine. Oh, yeah. So you've had a really good time today. And the reality is, that's fabulous, and a laugh is brilliant. When I was a student, you wouldn't be surprised to know that I got told off by a very politically correct and rather silly lecturer who decided that I wrote one of my assignments on the therapeutic use of humour. And this was quite a long time ago. Michael, I think about the time that we both did our training, so you can imagine that they didn't really enjoy that idea. So Michael's very young, so I don't know why I picked on him, but when you think about it, hey? It was a few months ago, quite right. We just started late. But when you think about it, the reason for that was that they said, the tutor said, you're making a joke out of people who learn disabilities. And I said, you're not getting it. I said, it's humour with and for the person, not at the person. Humour is a good healer. And there are not many articles still published today about the therapeutic use of humour, but it is a very powerful toxin for change and a positive one to make lives better. So don't forget, laughter is good, and tuning into the person. So whether you've got a fabulous colour like Jenny with her purple glasses, and the fabulous Andrew who likes Leicester. I've only met some of you for the very first time today, and I've really enjoyed meeting you. Jenny, you've been a superstar. Thank you for your project too, and doing the light bulbs. Oh, I love you too. There you go. And do you like Andrew as well? He's a nice bloke as well, isn't he? So I hope you've enjoyed today, but most importantly, there is one key message. Consider behind every behaviour change a health reason, be it physical or mental, and you will save lives as long as you act on that and do something. It is really, really that simple. And there is the movement that's there, the move for change. It's going to evolve over time, and it's going to be led and shaped by people with learning disabilities, their families, and those that support and love them. So that's what we're seeking to shift and change. There'll be key things that are deliverables on that, because I'm not one that likes to say, here's the challenge, here's the issues, here are the problems. Anybody can come up with those, but what are the solutions? And we have solutions. So do get behind this, do get involved. Things that you've got that are really good, like the things that Michael's worked on with the profound and multiple learning disability standards, send that through because it will get posted onto that website. You think you've got some really good examples of how to get things right for people and care right, then send them and I'll put them up there. You've seen already, Andrew told me at lunchtime that he's in a band and he's a lead singer. He's now going to have a London stage. He's going to be playing concerts with famous people like Sally Phillips and others. So that's the thing that can happen. So the future really is what you make it. You can make it bleak or you can make it bright. So over to you, Andrew, to have the final words.
Yeah. And also, I'd like to say a big thank you to the filming, the film crew at the back, because they've done really well themselves. And also, I'd like to do thank you to the person who's done Kylie, who's done the interviews on there with the good camera in the corner. And I'd like to say thank you to Lisa and Tom and Claire, because without them, they couldn't do the conference in the first place. And also, I'd like to thank my other co-chair, Jim, because he's done a marvellous job of doing this conference. And also, I love you all. And the thing is, no factors, no learning disabilities, it's no different than anybody else. We should be treated the same. Thank you very much. Enjoy yourself, and thank you.
Big up for Andrew. Fabulous. You've been, and I can tell you, wonderful. Thank you all. Bye-bye.